This is the Owl of Wisdom. Like and subscribe for 10 years of good luck. If you don't, it won't be pretty. What is the most corrupt thing you've ever experienced? Guy, in the days before the internet, I got fired by a private ambulance company for using the wrong pen to fill out Medicaid forms after a run. I used a ballpoint instead of the soft tip flare pens and was immediately sacked by the owner. A few years later, I found out he was imprisoned for Medicaid fraud. Turns out the soft tip pens he provided didn't go through all the carbon copies on the forms, and he was changing the bottom sheet to show more miles and services for each ambulance run before sending them to the state. The day I used the ballpoint was for a very long ride and cost him a lot of fraudulent money. That's why he was so infuriated. My university makes us buy a public speaking textbook published by the university and tear rubrics out of it. Your grades are penalized if you don't turn in the rubric torn out of the book for the teacher to mark your grade on. This ensures that you can't resell your book, so the next class has to buy brand new books. All the while, the university is putting up signs about why you should recycle. Not big compared to some others here, but I'm still salty about it. Edit. Update. I've just received an email to inform me that access to the building with the computer labs running expensive software we are required to use for homework is a privilege, not a guaranteed right. Most countries in Africa have the most blatant public corruption out there. Here is my example. Working in the country of Chad, which I don't recommend in case anybody asks, and brought my Xbox 360 in checked baggage. Going through x-ray screening on way out of airport and almost conned out of money by the screener, but he didn't speak any English, so he gave up. 1 month later, flying out of the country, you have to open all your bags before ticket counter, and they inspect for random things. Of course I had my Xbox 360 and conversation went like this. Corrupt inspector, Xbox. Me, yes, brought it from the States for personal use and now bringing it back. Corrupt inspector, invoice. Me, no invoice, personal use, bought in the States, and bringing it back. Corrupt inspector, no, invoice. This goes on for a couple more iterations until a local behind me pipes up. Local traveler, just pay him. Me, how much? Local traveler, just something. Ended up forking over 10,000 XFA to him in front of everybody, roughly $15 US. Corrupt inspector, okay, no problem, while zipping back up my checked baggage. Realizing that I was the only one who wasn't stealing from the company. Used to work in the ID department, and over time I noticed that things were going missing. Replace a bunch of monitors in a lab, then a few weeks later notice all the old ones are back. What happened to the ones I just delivered? We don't have nearly as many of something in stock as it says on our shipping receipt. And why are we always out of service? Kits for the copy machines? Yeah, all of that was going on eBay or Craigslist or somewhere else. Didn't realize it for years. Maybe I'm just really oblivious, but the whole department was in on this. I worked as a counselor at a youth shelter. Almost all the food/clothes were donated by local churches, and they didn't buy anything for the kids, so theoretically they were just paying to keep the lights on and to keep on minimum wage staff. They had a ridiculous amount of grant money, enough to cover the food/clothes plus activities for the kids, if they had had to pay for those things. Yet they skimped out on essential things like training. They gave me a CP certification without ever giving me any training. The shelter had rats and roaches, and at times bedbugs. The heat was out for a month, during a blizzard, on Christmas, with girls residing at the shelter. I reported them and nothing happened, except them interrogating the entire staff to find out who snitched. So clearly a lot of people were getting paid the money that was supposed to be going to homeless youth. Worst place I ever worked. Edit. The kids were a blast though. Loved everyone that came through, and that made it a much more bearable nightmare. An old friend of mine got a job working for a church-based charity. They would accept household donations and sell them in a thrift store they had set up to raise funds for the needy. His job was to drive around in a cube van, pick up the donated items, and deliver them to the charity. He openly bragged about picking the best items for himself and would drop them off at his house before delivering the rest of the items to the charity. I called him out on it and told him it was a bad idea seeing as his cousin and 2 aunts worked there and put in a good word for him to get hired. That's when he told me that they've been doing the same thing for years. He told me his aunts wouldn't even keep most what they stole, rather they would sell the items at garage sales, and that it was okay because that's how they make their money. To make matters worse, they were paid in cash, so they could keep collecting welfare. Pure trash, and needless to say I have nothing to do with them anymore. I used to work at a non-profit that provided financial education to middle school and high school students, achievement of juniors. The VP, my direct supervisor, was using money from our sponsors, the city schools, and No Child Left Behind, to pay for his girlfriend's apartment that was around the corner from our office. Somehow he was altering our records so that no one would notice. Side note, although this sounds like bullshit, his wife had cancer. I won't go into details, but I work for a municipality as a fairly low-level employee. I've been offered bribes on a number of occasions to let things slide here and there. All very tempting, but I like my job too much to risk it for $20 or so. Long story short, the biggest bribe I have been offered is $1,000. I reported it to my supervisor and his response was, "Fuck dude, why didn't you take it?" I sure as hell would have, but we filed an official report. Didn't go anywhere as I didn't know the name of the people. Makes me wonder what else is going on that I don't know about. I used to work for a global pharmaceuticals company. My boss was a mid-level manager, making pretty good money, low 6 figures, and this was 25 years ago. It wasn't enough, though. We had a company contracted to build some software for us. Somehow, they were paid about $4 million and never delivered working software. Every time we questioned this, we were blocked by the boss. It turns out that he was a silent partner in the software company. When he jumped ship, they promoted him to a manager position in another country. His successor immediately terminated the contract with the software company. Within 24 hours, the company was dissolved and all records disappeared. My ex-boss worked there for a few more years until it was clear that he was still lining his pockets with company money. He was then given the opportunity to pursue his career outside of the organization. Sometimes, white-collar crime does pay pretty fucking well. When I was getting food at food banks, the employees and volunteers would take the best quality / tastiest food for themselves or their friends. I live in a corrupt third world country. I literally see corrupt officials every day, and especially cops. I once was at an auto shop where a police officer was trying to sell the radiator of a police car and get it replaced for a cheap one he scavenged somewhere. The shop owner bought it. Another time I forgot my driver's license at home. A police officer came up behind me as I was returning home to get it. He pulled me over. I told him I had my license at home. He told me he could forget we met for the equivalent of $20 in local money. I told him no. Take me to the police station, make me a ticket, do what you need to do. He kept going on saying, come on, the fine will be like $200 and I'm asking for $20. I stood my ground and said no. He let me go when he realized he wasn't going to squeeze money out of me. I like to do air rifle shooting in my free time. One time a cop pulled me over and noticed I had a rifle case in my backseat. I said, yeah, that's an air rifle. He told me to open it, and so I showed him it was a simple air rifle, those that fire small pellets and are used for sport. He asks for my LTC. Wait, what? Air rifles don't need registry or license. He says all firearms need a license, which BTW, that's not true. Only modern firearms require a license. Firearms from 1899 and below don't. I say that's not a firearm. It is literally called an air rifle. He says he can look the other way if I pay up a small contribution. Of course I don't, so I'm taken to the police station. His chief then has to explain that an air rifle is by law practically a toy and no license is needed for it. You know what the best part is? The chief then comes to me and says, "You are free to go, but you should give me a small contribution for getting you out of trouble." So yeah, he wanted money too. I ended up giving him a large soda I had only to get out of there. Now I remember this one. My mom got pulled over for having her car's technical revision expired the day before. The technical revision is an obligatory certificate you must HVE to prove your car is in condition to be in the traffic. Usually this is a minor offense. You get a small fine and 30 days to get the certificate. The cops tried to squeeze money out of her, but she didn't want to pay a bribe. So in order to squeeze money, they took her to the police station. Everything should been quick. Just pay up the small fine and get your papers right in 30 days, right? But well, the cops took the pencil-filled ticket and used an eraser to change it. They added a bunch of stuff, busted lights, speed excess, etc. All summed up to more than $1,000, and the car was taken to the deposit. My father came to see what was going on, and since we needed the car and my parents are very wealthy, so it was no issue, we paid up the same day. But unluckily for these cops, my father is a lawyer and a pretty dang good one. He did some digging. These cops were out of their jurisdiction, pulling people over to jail bribes, using their uniform and police car when not in service, and going deliberately to the specific neighborhood my parents live in, just because it's a very wealthy zone. He found out about the fabricated claims and the modified ticket. He got access to a private security camera nearby to prove my mom didn't break any traffic laws. We sued. Got the money back, but those cops had some friends high up and managed to keep their badges. The level of corruption in this country's police force is just unbelievable. Never trust a cop. If you ever need anything, go to the military police, not the cops. The military police is there to actually protect you. The cops are just there to squeeze money out of you. Edit, since y'all asked, the country is Peru. Raffle for a jet ski at a local carnival sponsoring the local volunteer fire department. When they called the winner of the jet ski, I was standing right behind the guy who drew the ticket. When the ticket was drawn, he called a completely different name than was on the ticket. Winner was a close friend of the fire chief. Once while working as a night shift cashier at a store, my supervisor randomly told me to take a break and that he'd take over the register for me. I was just happy to sit down and went to the break room while he made small talk with a customer he seemed to know. I thought nothing of it and finished my shift as usual. The next day, the store manager called me into his office and fired me. I was flabbergasted. He said that I gave a 99% discount on over $150 worth of merchandise last night. I told him that I didn't and couldn't without supervisor approval anyway. They had to enter their unique code to give discounts. I was fired because it was my register and my supervisor kept his job. I attended a very small, very religious middle school for about 9 years and was ruthlessly bullied for the final 3. I was singled out by one girl who would constantly insult my hair, skin color, family, and anything I made the mistake of admitting I enjoyed. She even went as far as saying that the only way my mother was able to afford to send me to school was by being a whore. I was 12 at the time. I didn't even know what a whore was. I told my teachers and the principal, who said they would assess the situation and help out, which did a whole load of jack shit. They would stand next to our table at lunch, and when the bully, obviously, didn't say anything to me, would tell me she seemed polite to you today. I didn't hear anything wrong. I was even encouraged to invite her to my goddamn birthday party. Anyway, this all culminated at graduation, where my bully was awarded a special diploma and a scholarship to an equally religious private high school for exemplifying what it means to be a good Christian. I later learned that her family donated a large chunk of money to the school to help keep it running, which is definitely why everyone turned a blind eye to how horrible she was. The most corrupt thing I've experienced was in my first software programming job. I was in that industry for almost 10 years when I switched to programming for that same industry. The company I worked with had bought out another company and decided to merge a few departments. They moved the director of development to a different department. He had no development experience, so no biggie, and brought in a new CTO with his own personal development director. This guy was the worst guy in the world, as I would classify him as a junior developer at best. Apparently, he had created the software that his company used that we bought, and he was promoted to director at some point. He made decisions that caused our applications to not work and then made us push them out to production. Once the client started noticing, he would then blame the individual developer for causing the problem and then promise the client that he would personally fix the software and fire the developer who caused the problem. Needless to say, I was told that he couldn't be touched for any reason and that I was sole. They offered more money, my own projects, etc. But screw that. Not staying at a company that values people like that over hard-working employees. I work for a non-profit faith-based drug/alcohol rehab. Turns out that in 2018 our founder and president/CEO was skimming money from the company to, among other things, buy clothes and jewelry for his girlfriend. His wife must have been pissed when she found out. He had also ostensibly been clean for the better part of 30 years, but was also getting high. And he's an ordained minister with his own church. Had a friend who taught at a ritzy private school. Parents there pretty much bought grades. My wife and I bought a house. The landlord wanted access to the apartment we were living in the meantime, so he could renovate it and sell it at an exorbitant price. We told him multiple times that we were going to keep and maintain the apartment to the end of our lease, only had 23 days left, and that we were going to clean it, etc., like normal. He didn't like that. So he performed an illegal lockout, then charged us a $750 cleaning fee, saying we left it a mess, the entire $1,900 rent for the last month, and attempted to keep our $1,900 security deposit. What he didn't know is I'm not one of these uninformed foreigners he's used to threatening. I live in New York City in Bensonhurst, which has a heavy Russian/Pole/Italian and Chinese immigrant population. I know the law damn well. So I went to the apartment and recorded him in the act of locking me out. I'm big black dude, so I was showing restraint by not manhandling him, since I'd immediately be found at fault. Then I gathered every ounce of proof I could, built a case, and sued his ass. We also hit him with 311 hazard reports, and he got charged a shit ton for repairs. Lead, it was one spot in the closet, but he was still charged. After about 2 months of back and forth, he acquiesced and settled out of court, giving us back the full last month and full security without charging us the cleaning fee. Know the law, people. Don't let anyone try to pull one over on you. When I was in college, some friends and I moved into a really nice apartment. Only problem was it obviously wasn't cleaned from the last tenants, had fleas, and the basement was littered with cat shit. When we moved out, the landlord sent us an email telling us how disgusting we left the house. We actually cleaned it really thoroughly, and how he's keeping the entire deposit. Most of these kids will just let it slide rather than deal with the assholes, but there's a local lawyer that takes all these cases on for free. Some before and after pictures in the court, we got the full deposit back. He got a hefty fine. Thanks for watching the Chronicles of Reddit. Like and subscribe for a marvelous life of adventure.